Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always believed that my life was dedicated to serving the public and making a difference, balancing the demands of a rising political career and the responsibilities of being a devoted husband and father. Yet over time, the veneer of our perfect life began to crack, and I found myself on the receiving end of subtle, yet persistent emotional abuse. Rebecca, my wife, seemed to have mastered the art of diminishing my worth in front of everyone. It started with offhand comments at social gatherings. I recall one evening at a family reunion when, as we mingled under warm lights and soft music, she casually remarked to a group of relatives, "David may have a promising future in politics, but he sure struggles to handle even simple household matters. I suppose that's why I have to keep everything running smoothly." The words, delivered with a sweet smile, cut deeper than any physical blow. I felt my cheeks burn as awkward silence followed, and I forced a smile while inwardly crumbling with humiliation. Each time she made such remarks, my confidence eroded a little more. I had always prided myself on my determination and resilience, yet her constant need to remind everyone of my perceived shortcomings left me questioning my own worth. At first, I tried to brush it off as mere banter, a part of her quirky humor that I had grown accustomed to over the years. But as the insults grew more frequent, my inner turmoil deepened. Late at night, lying awake, I replayed those moments over and over in my mind, wondering if I was truly inadequate. I kept thinking, how can someone I love so dearly reduce me to a punchline in front of our family? The tension reached its peak at a holiday dinner when our extended family gathered at a large, beautifully decorated home. The atmosphere was festive. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the aroma of a sumptuous feast filled the room. I tried to engage in conversation, share my plans for an upcoming community event, when Rebecca interjected, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, David, always dreaming big, but sometimes you just can't seem to execute even the simplest idea. I suppose that's why I handle the real work." Her words, spoken so casually yet so cuttingly, elicited stifled laughter from some relatives. I felt exposed, as if every effort I had ever made was being ridiculed for my incompetence. The room spun with the weight of my embarrassment, and for the first time, I stood at a crossroads. Should I endure this endless cycle of humiliation or finally speak up for myself? My heart pounded, and in that pivotal moment, I realized that my silent suffering was no longer a tribute to my devotion, but a betrayal of my self-respect. As I excused myself from the table that night, the echoes of her derisive laughter haunted me, and I vowed that something had to change. I left the gathering with a heavy heart, burdened not only by the public shame, but also by the internal conflict of whether to confront the woman I once adored. That night, as I stared at my reflection, I wondered if my sacrifices were meant to build a legacy or merely to feed her need for control. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. I arrived at a dinner party with a mix of hope and lingering sorrow, determined to seek solace among close friends after the painful humiliation of the last gathering. The room was warm and inviting, filled with the soft chatter of acquaintances and the clinking of glasses. Yet beneath the surface, I could feel the tension that had been building over months of subtle degradation. I tried to lose myself in the conversations and laughter, but every so often I caught sight of Rebecca, my wife, weaving her way through the crowd with a charm that masked her cruelty. As the night progressed, her remarks grew sharper. At one point, while I was sharing a story about a successful community initiative, she interjected with a mocking laugh. "Oh, David, you're always so full of grand ideas, yet you barely manage the simplest tasks at home." Her tone was light, almost playful, but each word felt like a deliberate jab, and I could see some friends exchange awkward glances. My heart pounded in my chest as her laughter mingled with the murmur of the crowd, leaving me feeling isolated and exposed. I sat there, swallowing my rising anger and humiliation, wondering how many times I would endure her subtle, constant undermining. My thoughts churned with frustration and self-doubt. Was all my hard work in public service, all my sacrifices for our family, nothing more than fodder for her amusement? The breaking point came unexpectedly when a close friend toasted our achievements, and, before I could join in, Rebecca leaned in with a sarcastic smile and said, "Let's hear it for David, who somehow manages to be involved in every charity, yet still can't seem to manage his own life." The room fell silent for a moment before the laughter resumed, louder and more dismissive than before. In that charged silence, I felt the weight of every insult, every snide remark that had chipped away at my self-worth over the years. I couldn't hold back any longer. Rising abruptly from my seat, I addressed the room in a voice that trembled at first but soon grew resolute. "I have given my all, to my work, to our family, to every cause I believed in, only to have my efforts reduced to a punchline for entertainment." A hush descended over the table, and all eyes fixed on us. Rebecca's smile faltered as she opened her mouth to speak, but I pressed on. "Your constant ridicule has not only undermined me in public, but it has shattered the trust and respect that should form the foundation of any marriage. I deserve more than this. I deserve to be seen as a man who stands for something, not as an accessory to your vanity." For a long, agonizing moment, the room was filled with silence, every friend and relative grappling with the raw truth in my words. I could feel my heart pounding in defiance, mixed with a profound sorrow for what our relationship had become. As I returned to my seat, a heavy mix of relief and despair overwhelmed me. That night, as I left the party, the echoes of whispered conversations and uncertain glances followed me, and I realized that the sacrifices I had made had been twisted into tools for my public humiliation. In that moment, I understood that my life could no longer be defined by silent suffering, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I resolved that I would no longer allow my worth to be diminished by empty words. I was cleaning up the study one late evening after another grueling day of campaign events when something unusual caught my eye. Amidst the clutter of political flyers and old thank-you letters, I discovered a small, intricately carved wooden box tucked away behind a stack of documents. My heart skipped a beat as I slowly lifted the lid, revealing a sleek, expensive watch resting on a bed of dark velvet. Its polished surface caught the light, and an inscription on the back, "Marcus Alton," gleamed in elegant script. At that moment, a cold wave of realization washed over me. I recalled the secret credit card charges and the unexplained luxury spending that had crept into our joint account statements, dismissed by Rebecca as necessary expenses for her extra charitable shifts. Now, this watch was proof that something far more sinister was at play. I sat down heavily at my desk, holding the watch with trembling fingers as anger, betrayal, and grief swirled inside me. "How could you do this?" I whispered into the silence, feeling as if the ground beneath me had crumbled. Every memory of Rebecca's evasive smiles, her offhand mentions of meeting someone influential, and her inexplicable fascination with luxury brands began to form a damning mosaic in my mind. I remember that late-night phone call when her voice softened as she talked about an important opportunity and a discreet rendezvous that she had hastily excused as a networking event. Had I been so blind as to ignore the signs? My thoughts raced as I began to piece together the evidence. The expensive watch, the mysterious inscription, and a series of bank transactions that pointed to extravagant spending at high-end boutiques and luxury hotels. It all painted a picture of secret life I had never imagined. I felt the sting of humiliation and the raw pain of betrayal tighten their grip on me. I could no longer dismiss her words as mere exaggerations or harmless exaggerations meant to impress. They were lies that had cost me the very trust one had invested in our shared life. I rifled through our files and uncovered more damning proof. Screenshots of transactions, invoices from upscale stores, and even digital receipts for extravagant dinners. With each new detail, my heart sank further, and the reality became undeniable. Rebecca was cheating on me, trading the sanctity of our marriage for lavish gifts and political favor from a billionaire real estate mogul, my campaign's biggest donor. The shock of the discovery was compounded by the fact that all of this had been hidden in plain sight, cloaked in excuses of charitable work and extra shifts at the hospital. I sat in silence, the evidence spread out before me, each piece a brutal reminder of the betrayal. I knew that confronting her impulsively would only unleash chaos and further damage what little remained of our once promising union. Instead, I resolved to gather irrefutable proof, to let the facts speak louder than the lies she had spun. I began meticulously organizing every document into a secure file on my computer, labeling each screenshot and transaction with precise dates and details. I even considered hiring a discreet private investigator to follow her and document her movements, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. In that darkened room, illuminated only by the pale light of my computer screen, I made a solemn vow. I would reclaim my dignity and restore my integrity by exposing the truth. The watch, now safely locked away, had become the catalyst for a determination I had never known before. My emotions churned with a mix of sorrow for the life we had lost and a steely resolve to prevent any further deceit. I realized that the betrayal extended beyond personal hurt. It threatened the very foundation of my public life and the trust of the people who believed in my vision. With every piece of evidence I gathered, I prepared for the day when I would confront Rebecca with the full weight of her duplicity. That night, as I sat alone with the remnants of a shattered dream spread out before me, I understood that the truth was my only weapon against the lies that had poisoned our marriage. I steeled myself for the battles ahead, knowing that the journey toward justice and redemption had only just begun. I spent sleepless nights plotting my next move, the sting of Rebecca's betrayal fueling a transformation within me from a silent victim to a man determined to reclaim his dignity. Every cruel word, every offhand remark had built a wall around my heart, and now that wall was beginning to crumble under the weight of undeniable proof. I began by meticulously organizing every shred of evidence, the screenshots of bank statements, digital receipts from luxury boutiques, and text messages that confirmed her secret rendezvous with the billionaire real estate mogul. Sitting alone in the quiet of my study, I stared at the evidence spread before me and felt a mixture of rage and resolve. I will not be made a fool of any longer, I whispered to myself, my voice steady as I opened a secure file on my computer and began labeling each piece of evidence with precise dates and details. The process was methodical, almost therapeutic, each file a brick in the foundation of my planned redemption. I even consulted with a discreet private investigator, whose reports would later corroborate the physical evidence and establish a timeline of her deceitful activities. I remember one particular night when, after double-checking a set of receipts and correlating them with the mogul's known transactions, I muttered, "Every lie has its consequence." My mind raced with images of the luxurious hotels, the opulent dinners, and the lavish gifts that had come at the expense of our marriage. I imagined the shock on Rebecca's face when the truth was laid bare for all to see, and that thought fueled my determination. I began crafting a plan that was as precise as it was ruthless. First, I replaced the expensive gift, a symbol of her betrayal, with a counterfeit replica so perfect that even an expert would hesitate before questioning its authenticity. I did this quietly in the dead of night, while she was away on one of her so-called extra shifts, ensuring that no one would notice until it was too late. Then, I set up a secure digital vault where every piece of evidence was stored and encrypted. "This is for you, Rebecca," I murmured as I finalized the folder, feeling both sorrow for what we had lost and a fierce determination to expose the lies. Every detail was planned to perfection. I even arranged for a discreet tracking device on her car to log her movements and confirm the locations of her clandestine meetings. As I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind, I envisioned a moment where the truth would not only shatter her world, but also vindicate the years of humiliation I had endured. I practiced lines that would cut through the facade she had so carefully built, phrases like, "Your lies are now laid bare, and there's no escape from the truth," until they felt natural, as if they had always been part of me. With each passing day, my anxiety mixed with anticipation, and I became a man on a mission, every decision fueled by a longing to reclaim the respect and honor that had been stolen from me. I could almost taste the sweet, albeit bitter, victory of exposing her double life, knowing that every piece of evidence would eventually lead to a public reckoning. In the stillness of those long nights, as I cross-checked records and perfected my plan, I realized that this wasn't merely about revenge. It was about reclaiming my identity, my integrity, and my future. I knew that when the time came, the confrontation would be inevitable, and I would stand ready, armed with the undeniable truth of her betrayal. That night, as I locked away the final file and powered down my computer, a sense of calm determination settled over me. I was no longer a man crushed by humiliation. I was a man who had transformed pain into purpose, ready to expose the lies and rebuild his life on a foundation of truth. I arrived at the upscale restaurant on a chilly evening with a heavy heart and an unwavering resolve. Every step echoing the culmination of months spent gathering evidence and planning my moment of truth. The grand entrance, with its gleaming marble floors and crystal chandeliers, felt surreal as I made my way through the elegantly dressed crowd, knowing that soon I would confront Rebecca with every lie she had spun. I found a quiet corner from which I could observe the scene unfolding. There, in a private booth draped in deep burgundy curtains, sat Rebecca, radiant and seemingly at ease, across from a man whose confident smile and expensive suit immediately marked him as no ordinary companion. I watched as he leaned in, his hand reaching out to present her with a small, exquisitely wrapped gift, a gesture that spoke volumes of his affluence and the secret arrangement that had been unfolding behind my back. Every affectionate glance and subtle touch between them was a dagger to my already wounded heart, yet I forced myself to remain composed, determined to let the evidence speak for itself. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves, and walked directly toward their table. The room seemed to hush as I approached, every eye inadvertently turning in my direction. I slid into the empty seat across from Rebecca, the shock evident on both her and her companion's faces. "Rebecca," I said calmly, though my voice trembled with pent-up pain and anger, "I believe we need to talk about the truth." Her eyes widened, and the man shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident demeanor crumbling as quickly as my resolve. "David, what are you doing here?" she stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. "I am here because your lies can no longer remain hidden," I replied steadily, my gaze unwavering. "Every secret text, every extravagant charge on our joint accounts, every lavish gift, all of it paints a picture of a double life you chose over the truth we built together." I slowly slid out a folder from my briefcase, its contents meticulously organized, each document a testament to months of covert investigation. "This," I continued, tapping a screenshot of an online conversation with a billionaire donor, "is not the behavior of a wife who respects her marriage." A heavy silence fell over the table as Rebecca's face shifted from shock to a desperate mix of anger and sorrow. The man looked between us, his eyes pleading silently for an explanation he could not provide. I can explain," she tried, her voice cracking with panic. "Explain?" I interrupted softly, leaning forward. "Explain how you traded our vows for secret rendezvous and expensive gifts? Explain how you allowed yourself to be swayed by promises of power and luxury at the expense of our family?" My words, measured yet searing, filled the space between us. I could feel the eyes of the surrounding diners on us, their hushed murmurs adding to the intensity of the moment. "I trusted you, Rebecca. I believed in us, in the future we were building together. And now I see that all of that was a lie." For a long, agonizing moment, Rebecca remained silent, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as if pleading for forgiveness. The man finally spoke, his voice subdued. "David, please, let's not make a scene." I shook my head slowly, the weight of betrayal anchoring my every word. A scene is the only way to bring the truth into the light. After one final, piercing look at Rebecca, I gathered my evidence and rose from the table. "Goodbye, Rebecca," I said quietly. "I hope someday you learn the cost of deceit." With that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, each step a mixture of sorrow and hard-won victory, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and a woman whose carefully constructed world was now unraveling before the eyes of everyone present. I walked away from the restaurant, the echoes of stunned silence still ringing in my ears, and drove home with a tumult of emotions swirling inside me: relief, sorrow, and a growing sense of empowerment. The cool night air did little to erase the sting of betrayal, yet each mile took me further from the life I thought I knew. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed before me like a monument to shattered dreams. I took a moment to steady myself before stepping out of the car, the folder of evidence clutched tightly in my hand, a tangible reminder of every secret that had been hidden from me. I pushed open the door and entered into the dimly lit foyer. The silence inside was heavy, as if the walls themselves mourned the loss of our shared past. I barely had time to collect my thoughts when I heard footsteps approaching from the living room. Rebecca appeared, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fury, her posture defensive as if expecting an immediate confrontation. "David, what happened out there?" she demanded, her voice trembling between anger and panic. I took a steadying breath and replied, "I exposed the truth, Rebecca. I couldn't let your lies continue to destroy what we had built." Her face contorted, a flash of hurt quickly replaced by indignation. "You made a scene, David. You embarrassed me, our family." I stepped closer, my voice calm but resolute. "Embarrassment is the least of my concerns. I trusted you, believed in you, and all you did was betray that trust by living a double life. Every late-night excuse, every extravagant charge, it all adds up. I have proof, Rebecca, undeniable proof of your affair with that billionaire." She tried to interject, her voice rising in desperation. "This is all a misunderstanding. You don't know what you're talking about." I shook my head slowly. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I saw the texts, the receipts, and I even know where you were every time you claimed you were working extra shifts." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment, she looked as though she might break down. "Please, David, think about the children. We can work this out, just like we always have." But I could no longer ignore the truth that had been festering behind our smiles and shared dinners. The children deserve honesty, Rebecca, not a web of deceit. I spent too many years sacrificing my pride and my dignity for a marriage built on lies. I will not be manipulated by guilt or desperate pleas any longer. Her voice softened briefly, as if a flicker of regret might have reached her. "I never intended to hurt you," she whispered, though the words rang hollow in the charged silence. I took a step back, the folder still clutched in my hand, serving as a symbol of everything lost. Intentions don't erase actions. You traded our vows for lavish gifts and secret rendezvous with a man who promised you power and luxury. I deserve better than this. For a long, excruciating moment, neither of us spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, a collision of shattered trust and the painful necessity of truth. Finally, I turned toward the door, each step heavy with the resolve of a man reclaiming his life. "I'm leaving, Rebecca. I can't remain in a home where lies are the foundation." As I crossed the threshold, the sound of the door closing behind me marked the end of our shared past. Outside, the cool night air enveloped me once more, and though my heart ached with loss, I felt a flicker of hope, a promise that my future, built on honesty and self-respect, would be brighter than the ruins I left behind. I stepped into the law firm's conference room with a sense of grim determination, my folder of meticulously gathered evidence clutched tightly in my hand. The sterile environment, filled with the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the soft rustle of legal documents, was a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions that had consumed me over the past few months. Sitting across from me was my lawyer, a composed man with an air of quiet confidence, whose calm demeanor belied the storm of allegations I was about to unleash. He opened the meeting by saying, David, your evidence is overwhelming. We have every detail documented, from bank statements showing unauthorized luxury, spending to text messages that leave no room for doubt. I nodded silently as he continued to outline our strategy for the divorce proceedings, emphasizing that this case was not about vengeance, but about reclaiming my integrity and ensuring that the truth prevailed in both my personal and public life. In subsequent sessions with mediators and opposing counsel, I found myself retelling the painful chapters of my marriage with a steady, measured tone that reflected the strength I had cultivated through years of humiliation. One pivotal meeting came when the opposing counsel, with a slick smile, tried to paint me as the vindictive husband while portraying Rebecca as the innocent victim caught in a web of misunderstandings. As she sat next to her own lawyer, her eyes shimmered with feigned sorrow, and she pleaded, "I was only trying to secure a better future for our family," her voice quivering with emotion. I interjected softly yet firmly. The facts, however, tell a different story. I have records that show a pattern of secret luxury, spending, and discreet meetings with a billionaire real estate mogul, all while you claim to be working extra shifts. My lawyer added, "These documents corroborate Mr. David's claims and undermine the narrative that Ms. Rebecca is the wrong party." The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence on the table, each screenshot and financial record a testament to months of betrayal. I could sense the tension shift, the power dynamics slowly turning in my favor. In a moment of raw clarity, I addressed the panel of mediators directly, saying, "I have spent countless sleepless nights piecing together every detail, every transaction that reveals the truth about our marriage. My actions are not driven by revenge, but by a desperate need for honesty and accountability." The mediators exchanged looks of quiet approval, and even the opposing counsel's demeanor softened as the undeniable facts came to light. I left that meeting with a renewed sense of purpose, each step reinforcing the conviction that justice was within reach. On my drive home, I reflected on the irony that the same system I had trusted to serve the public could now serve as a vehicle for personal redemption. Every document in my folder was more than just evidence. It was a symbol of the years I had endured in silence and the strength I had found in my own resolve. As I parked my car outside my modest apartment, the weight of the legal battle ahead no longer felt like a burden, but rather as the necessary path to reclaiming my life. I knew the process would be long and arduous, filled with further testimonies, more reliving of painful memories, and relentless scrutiny of every detail of our past. Yet, in that moment, I felt an undeniable calm, an affirmation that my future, built on truth and integrity, was within reach. I had transformed my anguish into determination, and every piece of evidence was a step toward a new beginning. The journey to vindication had just begun, and I was ready to face every challenge that lay ahead, knowing that justice, at long last, would be served. I moved into a modest apartment on a crisp autumn morning, a fresh start that felt like a quiet rebellion against a past marred by betrayal. Every morning, as sunlight filtered through the faded curtains, I woke with a sense of liberation, a promise that I was finally free to rebuild my life on my own terms. The apartment, though small and unadorned, became a sanctuary where every room echoed with the possibilities of renewal. I set up a little workspace in the corner, dedicating myself to reconnecting with my passion for public service, a passion that had once driven me even when personal pain threatened to overwhelm me. My days soon filled with a new routine. Early morning runs along quiet streets, the soft rhythm of my footsteps matching the beat of a heart ready to heal. Afternoons spent poring over policy proposals and community projects that rekindled my belief in the power of truth, and evenings marked by quiet moments with my children, whose laughter and unguarded smiles reminded me that life, when embraced fully, could be beautiful even after heartache. I remember one afternoon in the park when my daughter tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Dad, are you happy now?" I knelt beside her, meeting her eyes with a tender smile, and replied, "I'm learning to be, sweetheart. Every day brings a little more light." Those simple words became my mantra, a reminder that despite the darkness I had endured, each new sunrise carried the promise of a brighter future. As I settled into my new life, I began to see the world through a clearer lens. My career flourished in ways I had never anticipated. Colleagues who once only nodded politely now recognized the strength and vision that had carried me through turbulent times. I took on leadership roles in community projects and found that my voice, once silenced by betrayal, now resonated with genuine conviction. Even my political rivals, who had once overshadowed me with empty criticisms, seemed to acknowledge that I had found a purpose beyond personal vendettas. Meanwhile, whispers of Rebecca's unraveling life drifted through the corridors of power and media. I learned that her luxurious escapades and secret liaisons had left her isolated. Sponsors and supporters had begun to distance themselves from the scandal, and the glittering promises that once defined her world were fading like distant memories. I never took pleasure in her downfall, but I could not ignore the natural justice that had begun to restore balance. At home, the simple joys became the pillars of my recovery. I took delight in small victories, a well-cooked meal shared with my children, a kind word from a neighbor, or the satisfaction of a hard day's work that contributed to my community. In the evenings, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city lights twinkle like stars on the ground, and allowed myself to dream of a future where I was no longer defined by past betrayals, but by the promise of new beginnings. One evening, as a gentle breeze carried the distant hum of the city, I confided in my best friend over the phone. I never imagined leaving her would be the best decision of my life. I've learned that true happiness comes from embracing who you are, not from clinging to a lie. His voice, filled with sincere warmth, affirmed that I was on the right path. Every day, I felt more confident and whole, a man who had not only survived the storm but had emerged stronger and more resilient. With each step forward, the scars of betrayal faded into a distant memory, replaced by a deep, unwavering belief in the power of truth and self-respect. I now look forward to each new day with hope, knowing that I have the strength to face whatever challenges come my way. My life is mine again, built on the solid foundation of honesty, hard work, and the unyielding love of my children, and I finally know that leaving Rebecca behind was the first step toward a future defined by freedom and integrity. The fallout was swift and unyielding, as the consequences of Rebecca's betrayals began to consume her once illustrious world. I watched from a distance as her empire of deceit crumbled. First, whispers circulated among influential donors and political allies, murmurs that soon grew into full-blown scandals splashed across the media. I had long known that the truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. In the weeks following our televised debate, where I had laid bare her secret liaisons and luxury, spending for the nation to see, reports emerged that her lavish lifestyle was built on unstable foundations. Former allies began distancing themselves, and the billionaire real estate mogul with whom she had danced the dangerous dance of forbidden favors found his own reputation tarnished by association. I remember one morning, as I read the headlines over coffee, a headline caught my eye: "Political star's wife faces fallout over secret affairs." The stark words sent a chill down my spine, not of regret, but of vindication. I received congratulatory messages from old friends and supporters, each one a reminder that truth and integrity always find their place in the light of justice. At a small celebratory dinner with trusted colleagues, one of them raised his glass and said, "David, you've not only reclaimed your life, but you've also shown that honesty always wins." Rebecca's fall is a lesson to us all. The simple sincerity of his words bolstered my resolve, reminding me that the journey to rebuild my life was not fueled by bitterness, but by the desire to restore trust in public institutions. Even as I experienced professional success and personal growth, I kept a careful watch on the developments in Rebecca's life. Invitations to high-profile events she once dominated became scarce. Sponsors who had once admired her shifted their support to emerging figures with unblemished reputations. In private moments, I saw her on television, her face a mask of despair and desperation as she attempted to salvage her career, only to be met with public outrage. I recall a particular evening when a prominent news anchor, with measured gravity, reported, in a stunning turn of events, the wife of rising politician David has been stripped of her privileges after revelations of her secret affairs. The very gifts and favors meant to elevate her have instead become the instruments of her disgrace. That report resonated with me, not as a moment of schadenfreude, but as the inevitable consequence of a life built on deception. I had learned that true justice does not seek revenge, it simply restores balance. One crisp evening, as I stood on the balcony of my modest apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. The pain of betrayal had forged in me a strength I never knew I possessed, and now, seeing Rebecca's world collapse, I realized that the scars of the past were slowly being replaced by the promise of a future defined by honesty. I thought to myself, I no longer need to exact revenge. My life has improved beyond measure. With each passing day, my professional accomplishments grew, my relationships deepened, and my inner peace solidified. The legal battles were behind me, and the echo of public humiliation was now a distant memory. Instead, I carried with me a quiet satisfaction, a knowing that I had not only survived but emerged triumphant. Rebecca's story, once a cautionary tale of deceit and ambition, had transformed into a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of the human spirit. In that serene moment, I smiled gently, realizing that justice, in its purest form, had been served, and I was finally free to embrace the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.